pats. And dump the pats into a dish. Move it over so you can see a little bit. The reason we're doing this is so that the air can get to them better, because by the time we need these, we want them very soft, if not melted. And that will be after our dough has risen, so the butter will be out for a while. We're just going to leave this butter out on the countertop until we're ready for it later. So butter in a dish. I'm going to put this aside on the counter. Throw the wrapper out. Now, got one egg. You want to break the egg into a glass measuring vessel. That's for 1 cup. You can use a bigger one if you want to, but this would be more accurate because we're looking for a 1 cup measure. That egg, mix it well. Okay. To that we're going to add some vanilla extract. 1 teaspoon of a good Madagascar vanilla. Keep that in the refrigerator at all times. Alright. And now we want to add to this egg and vanilla enough water, bottled water, purified water. If you don't want to use the bottles, if you have your own distilled water, but not the sink water. So to this we're going to add enough water so that it goes up to the line for 1 cup. So the egg and the water together are going to equal 1 cup. There we go. Okay. Put this water away. Beat this again. Just mix up the egg and the water. Now, to make the dough for cinnamon rolls, we're going to use an easy method instead of kneading by hand. We're going to use the bread machine. Yes, the bread machine. So I've got it right here. I plugged it in. And let me move it forward so I can open it. Okay. Make sure you have the pan for the bread machine securely in place inside. Read the instructions in the book for sure to make sure it's in properly. The paddle that's inside should be seated properly on the spindle. It's got a little flat side that goes over the spindle so you can't really put it in wrong. Just make sure everything's seated in there securely, because otherwise when you turn it on, it's going to make a mess and the pan will scoot around and you won't like that. Now in the bread machine, you always want to add the liquids first, work to the powdery things, the dry things, and the last thing is always the yeast. We want that to mix in last. We don't want the yeast to start activating until the machine is beginning its cycle. So it's always the liquids first. So we're going to put the egg and the water in there. Okay. That's done. Now I'm going to need some oil. Pardon me. I bumped the camera here. The oil's down here. Okay. Got some grapeseed oil, which is very good. You can use canola or any other oil. And I'm going to put 3 tablespoons of grapeseed oil. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's our oil. Okay, don't mind me if I read the recipe. I don't make this every day. We want 1½ teaspoons of salt. Salt. 1½. put the salt in there. 1.5 teaspoons of salt. 1.5 teaspoons. Put the salt away, we don't need it anymore. Okay, now that's in there. So we've got the egg with the water, the oil, and the salt, and then we also need some sugar. I'm going to put 1/3 cup of sugar in the dough. So let me get my measuring. There's 1/3 cup. I've got organic white sugar. This is white sugar, not brown. And it's not confectioner sugar. This is real sugar, granular sugar. Confectioner sugar we'll be using for the icing. Okay, 1/3 cup of sugar. And then we're going to have to do our flour. The rest of it will take all the measuring cups out. It's kind of silly. Okay, and now we're going to go with our 3.5 cups of flour. Got my flour here. I want 3.5 cups. I'm going to measure 1. Even the flour out, scoop it out into the scoop, and then even it out with the knife. 1. That gives you an accurate measure. 2. Just dumping this in the bread machine. 3. And then half. Okay. That's our flour. Seal that up later. I don't have to keep you waiting for that. Just off some of this flour, but messed up there. Now we need yeast. We're going to take out the yeast. The yeast stays in the refrigerator. This is a big bag of Red Star yeast that I get at Costco. It lasts at least a year if you keep it in the refrigerator, and it's excellent yeast. It does a really good job. And that we want 2 teaspoons of yeast. Get a clean teaspoon. We don't want to mix any sugar or salt into our yeast. That would be kind of messy. Let me see if I have another my teaspoon here. Okay, 2 teaspoons of yeast. That's 1. That's 2. Close up, get the air out of there, close up your yeast, put it right back in the refrigerator. You don't want your yeast to spoil. It has to stay in there. Okay, so now we've got all our stuff in there. The egg with the water up to 1 cup, a little bit of vanilla. The oil, 3 tablespoons of oil. 1/3 cup of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And 3.5 cups of flour and 2 teaspoons of yeast in the bread machine. Just dust it off if there's anything in the way. And now we're going to close the lid. And over here there's a button called Select. And on the side here are the different white, whole wheat, French, fruit and nut, batter breads, jam, dough, pizza dough, or bake only. We want dough. So press the Select button and watch the arrow. Goes a couple of times on white, then whole wheat, a couple of times there to French, a couple of times to fruit and nut, a couple of times batter bread, jam, dough. And that's what we want. There's no extras. We're not adding anything to the dough, so you don't press the extra button. Now all you have to do, it's on dough, start. And the timer starts at 1 hour and a half. So in 1 hour and a half, this dough should be ready to use to make the actual cinnamon rolls. In order to prepare for that now a little bit, for later. We've already done the butter and set it aside. We have one other thing to get ready, and that's the filling for the cinnamon roll. It's going to go on the butter. And that's going to be 1/4 cup of sugar. Still got our sugar here. I remember where I put it. Here it is. Get the flour out of the way. Alrighty, here we go. 1/4 cup of sugar. You don't have to level off the sugar, just shake it a little bit. It's not like the flour. It's a little more or less, it's no catastrophe. Okay, 1/4 cup of sugar. And 2 tablespoons, which is a lot, but there's a good reason. 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. This is Saigon cinnamon, the best cinnamon. And again, I'm just going to shake it out. It doesn't have to be perfect. I like extra cinnamon, actually. So if it's a little more, that's fine with me. This is almost empty. That's why I'm shaking it out. I do have a new bottle, but I want to use up this one. It's almost finished. The amount of cinnamon does not have to be accurate. I love cinnamon, so a little extra is good as far as I'm concerned. Now you're going to take one of these small forks and just mix up the sugar and the cinnamon. Make sure there's no lumps. And make sure they're mixed together. You don't see the white sugar separate from the cinnamon. Just keep mixing it up, mixing it up. It smells wonderful. It smells like nice cinnamon smell. It's delicious. And this is going to go on with the butter. This is going to form the filling of the cinnamon roll. It will melt in the oven. And have that nice cinnamon filling in the curls, folds, rolls of the dough, whatever you want to call them. Okay, once that's all mixed up well, set that aside where you have your butter on a counter somewhere. And the icing we don't make until you hear the machine just kicked into full mix. We're not going to make the icing until after they're baked and they've started to cool, and then we'll make the icing and drizzle it over the top. You can't leave the icing sitting around. You want to do that right when you're going to use it, so we're not going to work on that now. The pan that we're going to use is a stone pan. It's round. It's about 12, 13 inches. I'd say 12 inches. In stone, and the rolls are going to be cut and put into here to rise. They'll be rising. In the machine, the dough will rise, and then we're going to cut the rolls, and they'll rise in here for 30 minutes before we bake them. So the pan is here. We'll spray it later with Pam so they don't stick, but that's another procedure that we'll do after the dough is ready from the machine. Right now I just have the pan here sitting, waiting. I've washed it, it's clean, it's ready to go. So now the machine still has 1 hour, 26 minutes, to go. And I'm not going to keep the camera rolling and stand here that long, of course. So I'm going to stop the camera now and wash whatever I've messed up, put it away, and then when the dough is ready, I'll come back and we'll work on actually forming the cinnamon rolls and rolling it up, cutting, putting them in the pan, and setting them aside to rise. That'll be our next step. So far we just got the machine going to make our dough. It's a really nice way to do it because you don't have to stand there and mix everything by hand. Also, the machine will provide the proper temperature for the dough to rise properly. It's not too hot, not too cold, there's no drafts. It's a good place for dough. So the machine is handy. It doesn't make the biggest dough, so if you're making something large, this isn't that good. The largest this makes is a 2 pound, which sounds big, but it's not. So you want this for smaller things, and this is perfect for this recipe. Okay, so I'll see you in about 1 hour and 25 minutes. Okay, the alarm just went off on our bread machine. I'm going to move it up, take the pan out, take the machine out of the way. Right back. And a bottle of water here in case I need it. Okay, now I want our wooden dough board. I use this for pasta, all different doughs. And if you haven't used it for a while or you haven't kept it in a sterilized place, there's a spray, food surface sanitizer. You spray it on, leave it for 30 seconds, and wipe it off, don't rinse. And that will sanitize the surface so you don't get bacteria. But I've just cleaned this and it's ready to go, so I don't have to worry about that. I am going to need some flour. Which I did forget to take out again because the dough will probably stick a little bit. You don't want to stick your hands in the flour, so get some kind of scoop. I'll get a little plastic cup here. Take some out. Lightly dust the board with flour in the beginning. If the dough sticks, we'll put some more. Okay, and we're going to plot this dough out. If it won't come out easily, just pull it out. Sometimes it comes out, sometimes it doesn't. Any hard pieces from the dough machine, don't use them, throw them out. Sometimes it sticks, you know. It's a machine, it's not perfect. Put that aside. And here's our nice dough, see? It is a little bit sticky. So, a little more flour. These little pieces that fell off, just throw them out. Thank you. That was the UPS guy. Okay. Now we're going to sprinkle the top with some flour. What we want to create here is a rectangle approximately 12 inches by 6 inches. Okay? Doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need the tape measure. I'm using this straight rolling pin. For me, it works a little bit better than the big rolling pin type with the handle sticking out and everything. This one's a little better for this kind of dough project. And you want your rectangle to be as even as possible too, in width and length, as far as end to end, side to side. Of course, the length is different than the width. 12 inches one way, 6 inches the other. Just there. Okay, it's actually a little bigger. I'm going to even it out just a little bit. Okay, here's our rolled out dough. Now remember the butter that we softened? Got it over here. And it's really mushy and soft. See that? Yes, I've cleaned my hands. What we're going to do is rub the butter on the dough. Rub that on there. It's nice and soft. Just rub it on, but leave a little lip, a 1/2 inch lip of dough over there without butter, because we need it to be able to seal when we roll this up and close it. And if we have butter there, it can't close. The butter will just slide off. So we have to leave a little bit at the edge for the roll to seal. But otherwise, we're just going to put lots of butter on here. Cinnamon rolls are very rich, of course, but won't have them that often, so who cares? They're a treat. This is a comfort food. Cinnamon rolls are considered a comfort food. They are delicious. I'm not going to use the whole butter. I can see that there's actually more butter than I really need on here. So I'm going to leave some. So a nice thick coating of butter, and that's enough. Actually, I don't need any more, so I'm going to put that aside. Rinse my hands. This towel here. Okay, now remember that sugar and cinnamon mixture that we made before that we stirred up with the fork. Here it is. I'm now going to sprinkle that with a tablespoon onto the butter. You want to cover the entire butter area. The cinnamon and the sugar. Once again, don't forget that little lip at the end we want to leave. Oh, the cat just woke up. That's not good. She's going to be mad. Okay. Now we've got cinnamon on there and the sugar and the butter. Now we want to roll this up the long way. So we're going to start from this side where the butter goes all the way till the end. And roll as tightly as you can, not too tight. Roll it up slowly. Take your time because the cinnamon is moving there. Roll it up. Try and keep it a little tight if you can. Roll, roll, roll. Slowly so the cinnamon doesn't fall out. And now when you reach the end, you want to pinch as best you can. As a matter of fact, I'm going to wet this a little bit. I've got water here. By wetting the edge of the dough, it'll help it to stick. A little bit. And you know, if it doesn't stick, don't worry about it, because when we put it in the baking pan, it's going to, we're all going to butt up against each other anyway, so it'll be okay. But this is not sticking very well, so I'm just going to let it go. I'm glad that happened, so I can tell you not to worry about it. So we won't worry about it. If it doesn't stick, so what? Okay, now we need our pan. There it is. Remember, the stone pan. I'm going to get Pam. Don't get any dough underneath the pan. That's why I'm not sitting it over there. Spray the pan well with Pam. P-A-M, Pam. That's a vegetable-based cooking spray. It's all natural. It doesn't hurt anything. It does not impart flavor of its own. Get a nice towel here so that we don't get any dough on the pan. And now we want to cut. You're going to cut the cinnamon rolls with a knife. You have to cut very gently because you don't want to mess up the dough. You need to use the sharp knife. You don't want to squish the cinnamon rolls. And just sit them with the open edge, the one that's not sticking, against the outside of the baking pan. And that will keep them from opening up and messing up. Remember, slice very gently back and forth with the knife, slowly, like you're using a very fine hacksaw. So you get down to the board, make sure you've cut through. Leave a ½ space between the rolls, because they are going to rise again. They will butt up against each other. We're going to cut them again after they're baked, which is fine. See, I didn't go all the way through. You've got to be careful. You don't want these to fall apart and all the filling to fall out. That would be messy. And I'm cutting them approximately, I would say, from 3/4 of an inch to an inch. It's only approximate. You don't have to be perfect. Remember, the loose side, the open side of the roll goes against the edge of the pan. Cut gently all the way down, right down to that board. Make sure you hold it so the cinnamon doesn't fall out. Put the loose end against the pan. That thing. These are large cinnamon rolls, which is the kind we want. It's really very easy. It's not something difficult to do. It's a wonderful dessert. Cinnamon is very healthy for you. If some cinnamon falls in the bottom of the pan, don't worry about it, because when the butter melts, that's in there, it's going to go down the bottom, and that's all going to be absorbed back into the dough anyway. So don't be concerned about that on the bottom. Now we see we've got a ring here. Now we're going to put some in the middle. Now these, make sure the edge goes toward another cinnamon roll, okay? Because then as it rises, that'll keep it from opening up. We don't want these to open up and for the filling to come out. So now the ones in the middle have to butt. There's no edge for them to butt up against, so they'll butt up against another roll. But still leave a little bit of space, but have that edge where it's going to go up against another roll. And that'll protect it. Okay. Got 2 more. This last one's kind of small, but that's okay. They don't have to be even. They're going to rise anyway, and they don't have to be perfect. Now there you go. See, they're all in here. Nice. See? We're going to give a quick spritz to the top just so that they don't get a crust of pan. Quick spritz, not a lot. You don't want to soak them. Okay. And now we have to get our pastry cloth, which I just washed. This is a pastry cloth. I keep them in the kitchen here, and they're specifically for rising doughs. I just happened to wash this because I made bread last week. You want to cover the cinnamon rolls with the pastry cloth and set them aside. I'm going to put them over on the table in the dark, away from the draft. They have to sit for 30 minutes minimum. And in that 30 minutes, we will preheat the oven. I'm going to set the oven to 350 degrees. And when the oven is ready, we're going to put those in there, and we're going to bake them for approximately 30 minutes. You're going to keep checking them when it gets to about 20 minutes. When the top of the rolls is golden brown, take them out. You don't want them to get too brown. You don't want them to burn. It's approximately 30 minutes, but you have to check. You have to make sure that it doesn't go too long and that they don't get spoiled. You don't want it too short either. They'll be raw, and you don't want raw dough. It doesn't taste very good. So now we have our cinnamon rolls set aside rising. I'm going to put the oven on 350, and in 30 minutes, we will put them in the oven. Okay, here's our risen cinnamon rolls. You can see they've all squeezed up against each other. They've risen for 30 minutes, and now they're going to go into 350 degree oven. It's preheated for approximately 30 minutes, but I'm going to watch them and make sure they don't over brown and that they're not underdone. So here we go. Okay, we've baked for 30 minutes, and there they are. Nice cinnamon rolls. Now these have to cool, and then we can put the frosting, but they have to cool for quite a while, at least half an hour, 40 minutes, maybe more. But they look good, smell good, and I'm sure they taste good. So just put them aside to let them cool. Some of the filling is boiling over, but that's okay. Make sure you have aluminum foil on the bottom of the oven, so whatever spills on that and not on the oven, or you're going to have to clean the oven. I always keep a layer of aluminum foil on the bottom of the oven, so anything spills, you just pull the foil out, throw it away. You don't have to worry. That's our cinnamon rolls, and I'll come back on later to do the frosting with you. Now the cinnamon rolls have sat for half an hour, so they've cooled a little bit. They're still warm though. You want them to be a little bit warm when you do the frosting. So in a glass, 2-cup glass Pyrex, I put 1 cup of confectioner's sugar. Make sure you use confectioner's sugar, not powdered sugar, not granular sugar, excuse me, but the powdered confectioner's sugar. And into that, I want to put measuring spoon, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and then 5 tablespoons of milk. 1, keep the tablespoon handy because sometimes you have to adjust depending on the sugar. And get out a small fork and just stir that up. Make sure it's well mixed. You don't want any lumps. You don't want to see any of the sugar still in powdered form. You want it well mixed into the milk and the vanilla. It won't be very thick. This isn't one of those thick pasty frostings. This flows into the cinnamon rolls and gets absorbed. So it's not a real thick pasty icing. Then you just want to pour it using the Pyrex spout over the cinnamon rolls. Make sure you cover all of them, or somebody will end up with a roll with no icing. That's no good. Just drizzle it over. Looks like a lot of the frosting is just sitting on top, but that will soak in over time. You want this to sit for at least an hour now, giving the frosting a chance to soak into the rolls and to sink down. And that's it. That's your cinnamon rolls. Just let it sit. And then what you want to do after the frosting is soaked in is get a sharp knife and cut, because remember the rolls have risen together, so they were touching. And if you go to pull one out, they're going to be kind of stuck together and you could rip the one next to it. So you get a sharp knife and follow the lines in between the rolls, trace the knife around, and cut around all the rolls so that when you take one out, it'll come out easily. Also around the outside, around the edge, because they may have stuck a little bit to the pan, even though they shouldn't because the pan is there. Just to be sure, just go around the sharp knife. And there you go, cinnamon rolls. Yum. Well,